Once you've installed the feature pack and you've augmented a profile, now you're ready to work with the actual feature pack. And probably the best place to start, there's two places. One would be the sample that's shipped with it, which I'll go into in a minute. The other would be the API. So if you look at the Getting Started guide, you'll see a link for the API documentation, and that will link you to the Java doc. So in this feature pack beta, we will be providing the runtime for these W3C standards, and the way to interact with these W3C standards would be through the XML feature pack API. And if you browse around in the Java doc, you can find how to do things. I'll actually show you through the samples how to do things, but probably the best place to start would be to look at XFactory. XFactory is about the top level concept that you're going to work with most of the time when you're starting to code a feature pack application. But I think it's always easier to sort of learn through samples. So if you follow the Getting Started guide, you'll find a way to install a sample application that comes with the XML feature pack. So in this sample application, you'll find three basic invocation samples and then a more end-to-end application, which I'll go over in a future demo. But if you load up the application, you go, as you follow instructions, it'll tell you to load up the index.html that's in the XML feature pack samples application that gets installed. And what you can do is you can look at some very simple examples of how to use this technology. So the most simple example is, how do I invoke a new XPath 2 executable? You can see that there is a class within the sample application called Simple XPath. It has an execute method. You pass it the data file and you pass it the XPath that you want to execute. And you can see from the sample application, you can actually click to download the source code, and you can see that it's fairly simplistic. As I said before, you always start with an XFactory, so we create an XFactory to create our other objects from. We will prepare an XPath based upon that string that was passed in. We will get a resource. This could be connected to the network. In this case, it's connected to a local file that's part of the enterprise application. So that file that was passed in gets loaded as a stream source. And we'll create a cursor from executing that XPath. The cursor is just a way to interact with the results that come back from the XPath. And you can see after I get the results, if they're not null, I'll just get the string value of each of the values that's returned. So you can see I was searching for, in the document, the first name and the last name of that first name. So you can see the result is Doe. In each of the samples, you can see above and beyond the simple invocation, we go into some of the new features that come with the XPath 2, XSLT 2, and XQuery standards. So you can see under XPath we have a second sample that shows how to use backwards compatibility mode, and we have a third sample that shows how to use the new schema awareness that is built into the XPath 2 data model. And you can see how we use the document function. So those are some other very important things that as you start to learn the new standards, you'll want to know how to use within the runtime and with this API. And again, you can click to download the code and see the example and kind of cut and paste that into your own functionality. Within the sample, I started with XPath, you'll see that there's a similar thing for XSLT. So you can see for a simple XSLT, you can see how to do a very similar invocation. The only real difference is now you can see the API, we start with a factory, we get the same source. Now instead of preparing an XPath, we're going to prepare an XSLT, and you can see that I create an output result, which is in XSLT. I'm not going to directly navigate the results. I'm just going to put it into another tree structure, and I'm going to execute the transform from the input to the result. And much like the XPath example, above and beyond the simple invocation, there's a wealth of samples here for XSLT that show you how to use some of the very interesting new features. Again, backwards compatibility mode, the updated for each to use heterogeneous sequences, the grouping support, regular expression support, formatting of dates and times, having multiple output documents. That's a very interesting new feature of XSLT2. Tunnel parameters, which is a nice way to reuse existing style sheets, required parameters, style sheet functions, how to invoke an initial template. That's another very interesting new feature of XSLT2. Multiple modes, XHTML support. That's a new formatting for XHTML output, and character mapping. And similarly for XQuery, there will be a simple invocation sample that shows you the very basic way of invoking XQuery. You can see very similarly now, instead of preparing an XPath or an XSLT, now I prepare an XQuery of the string that was passed in and execute it. Again, you can download the source code, you can download the files. Showing you some basic Flower support, which is the main language of XQuery, and how you declare functions and variables. So in a future demo, I'll actually go through the more end-to-end sample and show how this integrates into a larger enterprise application. But for now, I hope that helps you get started with the XML feature pack and helps you understand how to do some very basic things. So finally, I want to note that off of the Open Beta website, you'll find the link to the forums. And the forums are the way that we can interact with you for your experience on this beta. And you can actually see how other consumers of the beta are working with the beta. So I think this will be a really great place for us to collaborate on how this beta works for you and what things you have found as you worked with the beta. Thank you.